Wren Beaumont missed her mother's final moments because her husband said he needed her somewhere else. That is where this story begins. Not with the betrayal she found on his phone. Not with the divorce papers. Not with the sealed envelope that arrived later and changed everything. It begins there, in a hospital waiting room, with a phone on silent and a mother asking for her daughter twice. And I need you to sit with that for a second before we go any further. Because everything that follows, every choice Wren makes, every door that opens and closes in this story, traces back to that waiting room. To what a woman is willing to give up when she has convinced herself that giving things up is what love looks like. Welcome! Wherever you are watching from, drop your city in the comments, because stories like this one need to know who they are reaching. And if this is your first time here, subscribe before this video ends, because what we do here is tell the kind of stories that stay with you long after they are over. This is one of those. My name is not important. What is important is Wren Beaumont. And this is her story. She had spent 7 years making herself smaller so Deval Ashby could feel larger. That was not how she described it at the time. At the time, she called it love. She called it partnership. She called it what patient women call things when they are still waiting to be rewarded. Wren had met Deval at 24, in the kind of season where everything feels possible and nothing feels permanent. She was working 2 jobs, a morning shift at a copy center in downtown Detroit and an evening shift waitressing at a family restaurant off Grayshot Avenue. She was saving, slowly, with intention. She had a folder on her laptop called Someday that held bookmarked apartments in New York City, design school applications she had not yet submitted, and a photograph of the Manhattan skyline she had clipped from a magazine at 12 years old and kept through every version of her life since. She had carried that photograph from bedroom to bedroom, through her mother's illness and her mother's death, through every chapter that had not yet become the chapter she actually wanted. Deval found her in that in-between place. He was charming in the way that men are charming when they have decided they want something. Funny, attentive, and just uncertain enough about his future that Wren's instinct to nurture kicked in without her fully noticing. He was starting a master's program in business administration. He had ambition but not yet the infrastructure to hold it. And Wren, who had been building infrastructure her entire life, saw someone she could help build. That was the mistake she would spend years understanding. She did not quit her jobs. She added to them. She picked up extra shifts, took on weekend catering work, and quietly redirected her someday folder toward something she told herself was better, a shared future. She paid rent alone for the first 2 years of their marriage so Deval could study without distraction. She cooked, cleaned, managed the bills, and handled everything that needed handling so that he could sit at his desk and become the man he kept telling her he was going to be. When his mother called from Harlan, Kentucky with emergencies, and she always called with emergencies, Wren sent money without being asked twice. Car trouble. Medical bills. A roof that needed patching before winter. She sent what she had because she had married into that family and she took that seriously. One evening, about 2 years into the marriage, she had left the Someday folder open on the kitchen table while she was cooking. She had been looking at a design program in New York, one she had been quietly watching the application deadline for, daring herself to fill out the form. It was the first time in months she had let herself sit with it long enough to feel something close to real. Deval came in from his study, glanced at the screen, and said, without breaking stride toward the refrigerator, New York. Right. He poured himself a glass of water. You were never really going to do anything with that, were you? He said it the way you say something you consider already settled. Not with anger. Not even with awareness of what he was doing. Just final, the way people are final about things they have already decided for you without asking. Then he went back to his desk. She closed the laptop. She sat with the sting of it for exactly as long as she could afford to, which was not very long, because dinner was on the stove and he would be hungry. She told herself he was stressed from the program. She told herself he did not mean it the way it landed. She cooked the rest of the meal and said nothing, and by the time he came back to the table she had already folded that version of herself away somewhere she would not have to look at it. She was good at that. She had been getting better at it for 2 years. 6 months after the laptop incident, Duval had 3 colleagues over for dinner. Wren had spent the afternoon cooking, had set the table carefully, had made the kind of meal that people remember. The evening was easy and warm, and she was glad for it. At some point one of the men, a talkative one named Breck, leaned across the table and asked her what she did. She opened her mouth. Duval got there first. Wren keeps things running around here, he said, with the easy smile he used when he wanted people to find him charming. You know how it is. Somebody has to. He laughed. His colleagues laughed. Breck nodded the way men nod when they have already moved on to the next thing. Wren smiled. She picked up her fork. Later, after they left and she was washing dishes, Duval came in and said she had done a great job tonight. He meant it as a compliment. That was the part that sat with her longest. He genuinely meant it. He had no idea what he had taken from her at that table. He had not even noticed there was anything to take. She dried her hands and said thank you. She was good at that. She had been getting better at it for 2 years. What she did not understand then, but would understand later, sitting in a spare room in Fenwick with her mother's last words still fresh in her chest, was that small dismissals are the ones that do the most damage. Not because they are dramatic. Because they are not. Because they happen in the middle of an ordinary evening while dinner is cooking, and nobody raises their voice, and by morning you have already made peace with a little less of yourself than you had the day before. When Duval's thesis defense fell in the same week as her mother's funeral, she stayed. She drove him to campus. She sat in the waiting area while he defended the research she had edited through 17 drafts. She held his hand after and told him she was proud. She got the news about her mother, Celestine Beaumont, over the phone from her Aunt Claudette, while Duval celebrated with his department over drinks she was not invited to join. What Claudette did not tell her that night, because she could not bring herself to, was that Celestine had asked for Wren in her final hours. She had asked twice. The nurses had noted it. Claudette had tried to reach Wren and gotten no answer because Wren's phone had been on silent in the hospital waiting room while Duval defended his thesis, and by the time Wren saw the missed calls, her mother was already gone. She did not find that out until months later. She did not cry in front of anyone the night Celestine died. She went home, sat on the floor of their bathroom, and said goodbye to her mother through the bathroom tiles. She told her she was sorry she had not made it. She told her she loved her. She asked her to wait somewhere she could eventually find her again. Then she got up, washed her face, and made dinner for when Duval got home. That was the kind of woman Wren Beaumont was. The discovery came on a Sunday, which somehow made it worse. Sundays had always been the one morning she allowed herself to be slow. She made coffee before Duval woke up, sat by the window with her book, and let herself believe, just for 1 hour, that the life she had built was the life she had chosen. He had left his phone on the kitchen counter. She was not looking. She was never the kind of woman who looked. The screen lit up with a message from a contact saved as only a first name, the way contacts are saved when someone does not want them questioned. Sailor. She did not read the message immediately. She put the phone face down and stood at the window for a long time, watching the ordinary Sunday morning happening outside without any knowledge of what was shifting inside the apartment. A neighbor walking a dog. 2 kids on bikes. A delivery truck moving slowly up the block. Then she picked up the phone and read everything. 2 years of messages. Hotels that Wren's overtime had paid for. Conversations about a future that did not include her. Complaints about her, written casually, the way you complain about something you are not afraid of losing. He had described her devotion as predictable. He had called her steadiness suffocating, to a woman who was receiving the benefits of that steadiness from a different hotel room. And then, deep in the thread, a message that she read 3 times because some part of her kept hoping it would change. He had written, "She's not going anywhere. She doesn't have anywhere to go. I'm her whole plan." She put the phone down. She stood at the window. She thought about the copy center and the restaurant and the catering shifts and the money sent to Harlan and the waiting room and the bathroom floor and the 17 drafts. 7 years of a life given to a man who had written those words to another woman and then come home and let her make his dinner. That was what she was to him. Not a partner. Not a person he loved. A plan with no backup. She read the rest. She made herself read every word, because she understood, in some quiet and certain place inside herself, that she would only allow herself to do this once. She was not going to spend the next decade wondering if she had misread something. She had not misread anything. She put the phone back on the counter, exactly as she had found it. She finished her coffee. She waited until Duval woke up, came to the kitchen, poured himself orange juice, and said, "Morning," without looking at her. She said, "I want a divorce." He turned around. She did not explain. She did not cry. She did not throw anything or raise her voice or give him the satisfaction of watching her fall apart in real time. She said it the way she said everything important, quietly, without performance, with complete finality. He tried to talk. He tried several versions of talking, and she let him work through all of them. When he was finished, she said it again, and this time he heard that there was nothing beneath it to negotiate with. The divorce was handled in the same way. Quietly. Without drama. She did not fight for the apartment. She packed 2 suitcases, the same way she had arrived in his life, and she left. No final speech. No door slammed for effect. She simply removed herself, thoroughly and without looking back. Her Aunt Claudette had a spare room in a town called Fenwick, 40 minutes outside Detroit. Small, quiet, the kind of town where people knew your name but had the grace not to ask too many questions about how you had ended up there. Claudette met her at the door, took one of the suitcases without a word, and had a plate of food on the table before Wren had even sat down. "You don't have to explain anything," Claudette said. "I know," Wren said. She slept for 11 hours that first night. She did not dream. It was 3 weeks into staying at Claudette's that Claudette finally told her about the missed calls. About Celestine asking for her. About the nurse's notes. She told her gently, the way you tell someone something they needed to know a long time ago and you are only just finding the courage to say. Wren sat with it for a long time without speaking. Then she said, "She asked for me." "Yes," Claudette said. "And I was in a waiting room." "Yes." She did not say anything else that evening. She went to the spare room and closed the door behind her. She made it to the edge of the bed before she came apart. Not the composed kind of crying. Not the kind you do when you want to seem like you are holding up. The other kind. The kind where your whole body gets involved, where you press your face into your hands because you do not know what else to do with it, where you hear sounds coming out of yourself that you did not know you were capable of making. She had been holding that particular grief since the day her mother died, the specific grief of not having been there, and it had been waiting behind everything, patient the way grief is patient, and now it had its moment and it took all of it. She cried for her mother. She cried for the waiting room. She cried for every version of herself that had folded smaller and called it love. She cried because Celestine had asked for her twice and she had not been there and she could never fix that, not with anything she did from here forward, not with any foundation she built with her mother's name on the wall. That was the one thing she could not undo. When it was done, she lay back on the bed and stared at the ceiling for a long time. Then she sat up. Not peace exactly, but clarity. The kind that does not tell you what to do next. The kind that simply removes the noise covering what you already knew. She understood what the 7 years had cost. Not just the money, not just the shifts, not just the dreams she had folded and put away. She understood what it had cost her to stay in a waiting room when her mother was asking for her. That was the one she would carry longest. The one she would have to make her peace with, because she was not willing to carry it as guilt for the rest of her life, and she knew Celestine would not want her to. She sat with all of it until the room got dark. Then she turned on the lamp. Whatever came next, she was going to face it as the full size of herself. The job at the Alderton Guesthouse came through a flyer on a community board outside the post office. Front desk, part-time, with the possibility of full-time hours. The pay was modest. The work was not difficult. She answered phones, managed bookings, handed out keys, and smiled at strangers passing through on their way to somewhere else. It was a place to land. Not a destination. Just somewhere to catch her breath while she figured out what direction she was pointing in. She had been there 6 weeks when Roscoe Phillips checked in on a Thursday afternoon. He was unremarkable in every way that seemed deliberate. Mid-50s, quiet shoes, a jacket that was practical rather than impressive. He drove a rental car. He carried a laptop bag and, tucked under his arm, a single sealed envelope. He wore no watch. He did not look like someone who needed to prove anything, which, Wren would later understand, was exactly the point of him. He approached the front desk and asked for her by name. Not Wren. Not the woman at the desk. He asked for Wren Celestine Beaumont. Her full name. Her legal name. The name she had used before she became Mrs. Ashby and slowly disappeared inside that identity. The name that appeared on exactly 2 documents in this entire building, her employment file and her identification card. The air in the room changed. "That's me," she said carefully. He placed the sealed envelope on the counter between them, sliding it toward her with both hands, the way you place something you have been trusted to deliver without opening. "I was asked to bring this to you personally," he said. "I was told you would know what to do with it when you opened it." "Who sent you?" she asked. "Someone who has been waiting for the right time," he said. "And I was asked to tell you that the right time is now." He picked up his room key and walked to the elevator without offering anything else. The doors closed. Trudy Sams, who worked the booking system 2 desks over and had watched the entire exchange, rolled her chair directly alongside Wren. "Do not open that envelope," Trudy said. "I am serious. That is how people end up on the news. You do not know that man. You do not know who sent him." Wren looked at the envelope. Her full name was written across the front in handwriting she did not recognize, careful and unhurried, the kind that belonged to someone who still wrote things by hand as a deliberate choice. Her phone buzzed on the desk beside her. Duval. She looked at his name on the screen. She thought about the waiting room. She thought about a message she had read on a Sunday morning that said she did not have anywhere to go. She thought about her mother asking for her, twice, and getting a voicemail. She declined the call. She picked up the envelope and opened it. Inside was a letter, 2 full pages, written by hand on heavy cream paper. And beneath the letter, a boarding pass. One way. Detroit to New York City. Departing in 4 days. She read the letter standing at the front desk. By the time she reached the bottom of the 2nd page, her hands were not entirely steady, and Trudy had stopped pretending to work. The letter was signed by a woman named Ivory Abra. Wren did not recognize that name. But the letter opened with a name she knew better than almost any other in the world. It opened with Celestine. Ivory Abra wrote that she had known Celestine Beaumont for 31 years. That they had met when Ivory was 22 years old, newly arrived in Detroit from Lagos with $70, 1 suitcase, and a business idea that every person she approached had declined to take seriously. She had been sitting on a bench outside a bank where she had just been turned down for a small business loan, trying to decide whether this was the moment she admitted defeat, when a woman came out of that same bank, looked at her, and sat down beside her and asked if she was all right. That woman was Celestine. Celestine had not offered pity. She had taken out a small notebook, asked specific questions, identified the 3 places the presentation had failed to make its case, and spent an hour helping Ivory restructure the argument. Then she walked back into that bank, requested a different loan officer by name, and sat beside Ivory while she made the case again. The loan was approved that same afternoon. The business Ivory built from that loan was now Abra Collective, a privately held firm operating across 7 countries. She did not list the assets because, she wrote, she felt the number would distract from what she was actually trying to say. What she was trying to say was this: Celestine had been her closest friend for 31 years. And in the final year of her life, Celestine had asked Ivory for one thing. She had asked her to watch over Wren. Not to interfere. Celestine had been very specific. She did not want her daughter rescued. She had raised Wren to be fully capable, and she believed in that without reservation. What she had asked Ivory to do was wait. To wait for the moment Wren chose herself, completely and without qualification. And when that moment arrived, to open a door. The boarding pass was a door. What waited on the other side was not charity. It was an opportunity Ivory had been building for 3 years, holding it open, waiting for the right person. And the right person, Celestine had told her more than once, was her daughter. The letter ended with one line that Wren read 3 times. Your mother sat beside me on a bench when I had nothing and never asked for a single thing in return. This is not me repaying Celestine. This is me honoring her. There is a difference. And she told me you would understand that difference. Wren folded the letter. Trudy watched her face. Are you all right? Yes, Wren said. And then, because it was true in a way she did not yet have words for, she said it again. Yes. That evening she showed the letter to Claudette, who read it slowly, the way she read everything. When she finished she set it on the bed between them. She never told me about this woman, Wren said. Your mother did not tell anyone everything, Claudette said. That was her nature. But she talked about you constantly. She talked about what she was afraid you were quietly giving away. She looked at Wren directly. She knew. She watched you disappear into that marriage and it broke her heart. She never said any of that to me. She said plenty. You just were not yet in a place to receive it. Wren looked at the boarding pass. New York City. 19 years she had loved it from a photograph. What if it isn't real, she said. What if it is? Claudette said. She sat with the fear honestly. Then she started packing. She gave her notice at the Alderton guesthouse the next morning. The manager asked if she was sure, twice. She thanked him for giving her a place to land when she needed one. She meant it. Trudy did not seem surprised. She leaned back in her chair with the look of someone who had called something correctly and intended to be acknowledged for it. I knew it the second you opened that envelope, she said. You call me when you get there. I don't even know what there is yet, Wren said. That, Trudy said, is exactly the part I'm most interested in. Claudette drove her to the airport on the 4th morning. They sat in the parked car after they pulled in, neither of them in a rush to end the moment. She would be so proud of you, Claudette said finally. Wren nodded. She did not trust her voice. Not just because you're doing something brave, Claudette continued. Because you held yourself with dignity when you had every reason not to. Because you did not let what that man did to you make you bitter or broken. You chose yourself without making a spectacle of it. She held Wren's hand briefly. That was all Celestine. Everything she put into you is still in there. Wren hugged her for a long time. Then she picked up her bag and walked into the terminal. The car that met her in New York was a clean sedan driven by a woman who introduced herself only as someone Ivory had sent. They drove through Queens, across a bridge, into Manhattan. Wren watched the city through the window with the specific feeling of something that had lived as a photograph becoming actual. The office was in Midtown. 12 floors. Nothing about the exterior announced itself. She would come to understand that was very much Ivory Abra's approach to everything. Ivory was waiting in a conference room. Precise in the way she held herself, wearing small gold earrings and nothing that needed to prove anything. She extended her hand. Wren Beaumont, she said. I have been waiting a long time to say that name out loud in this room. They talked for 2 hours. The bench. The 31 years. And the last conversation Ivory had with Celestine, 3 weeks before she died. My daughter is giving herself away to a man who does not know what he has, Celestine had said. Promise me that when she finally stops, you will be ready. Wren felt the tears come and did not fight them. She did not want me to come to you early, Ivory said. She knew you were capable of finding your own way out. She said if help arrived before you made the choice yourself, you would spend the rest of your life wondering whether you could have done it alone. She looked at Wren steadily. Could you? Yes, Wren said. I know, Ivory said. That is exactly why you are sitting here. The foundation was called the Celestine Initiative. Ivory said the name carefully and gave Wren the moment she needed. It funded and mentored black women building businesses and creative careers in cities where the structural support was thin. What Ivory needed was someone to run the daily work. Someone who could hold many complicated things at once without losing any of them. Someone with patience, precision, and genuine investment in other people's growth. Someone who had been doing exactly that work for years, just for the wrong person. This is not a favor, Ivory said. I am doing this because you are the right person for this work, and I have been looking long enough to know the difference. She slid a folder across the table. Read everything tonight. Come back in the morning with your questions. She read it that night in an apartment on the upper floor of the building, looking out over a city she had loved from a photograph for 19 years. The work was real and demanding. It required the patience, the precision, the ability to keep many complicated things moving at once without losing any of them. The exact set of capacities she had spent 7 years applying to Deval Ashby's life. She thought about every woman who had poured herself into the wrong container and then had to figure out how to reconstitute. She thought about what it would mean to spend her working hours making sure other women had resources, visibility, and proof that it was possible to build something that belonged entirely to them. She called Claudette at 11 o'clock. I'm going to take it, she said. I know, Claudette said. You cannot possibly know that. Wren, Claudette said. You were always going to take it. From the moment you read that letter. The only question was how long you needed before you could say it out loud. Wren laughed. A real one, the unguarded kind. Get some sleep, Claudette said. You have work to start. 8 months later, Deval Ashby was quietly restructured out of his position at the logistics firm where he had built a career on the foundation of 7 years of Wren's double shifts. The firm had lost a significant contract to a company in partnership with Abra Collective. Nobody announced the connection. It simply happened, the way things simply happen when the world catches up to what has already been decided. He called once. She saw his name on the screen, sat with it for a moment, and did not answer. The Celestine Initiative held its first public event 14 months after Wren arrived in New York. 43 women from 6 cities came through the doors. The room held the particular energy of people who have been waiting a long time for someone to take them seriously, and have finally found the place that will. Before she walked in, Wren stood alone in the hallway for a moment. She reached into the pocket of her jacket and took out her mother's notebook, the original one, worn at the corners and soft from years of use, that she had found in a box Claudette had saved from Celestine's house. She opened it to the last entry and read it one more time. Wren is going to be all right. She does not know it yet. But she is going to be more than all right. She just needs to reach the other side of where she is right now. And when she does, she is going to help more people than I ever could have. I raised her for this. I just did not know yet what this would look like. I think it is going to be beautiful. She closed the notebook. She put it back in her pocket. She took one breath. Then she walked into the room. She was 3 steps through the door when she saw him. Deval was standing near the back, by the entrance, wearing the expression of a man who had not expected to need an explanation for his presence. He had seen the event publicized somewhere, she would later learn, and had come with the particular audacity of someone who still believed he retained some claim on the space she occupied. He took a step toward her. A member of the event staff moved first, quiet and direct, and said something to him in a low voice. He stopped. His eyes found Wren across the room. She looked at him. Not with anger. Not with pain. With the clear, settled gaze of a woman who has arrived somewhere he does not have access to. Then she turned back to the room full of women who needed her. He stood there for a moment longer. Long enough to see the banner on the back wall of the room, the one that ran the full width of the space, large enough that there was no missing it from where he stood. 2 words in clean, bold letters above the foundation's name. The Celestine Initiative. Her mother's name. On a wall in New York City. At an event Wren had built. In the city she had taped to her bedroom wall at 12 years old, and he had told her she was never really going to do anything with. He did not know. He had not known any of it. He had called once, gotten no answer, and gone back to the life he had been building while she was building this. And standing there in a doorway, a security staff member was already moving to escort him out of, he understood, for the first time and all at once, exactly what he had cost her. And exactly how little it had slowed her down. He left without speaking to anyone. Wren did not see him go. She was already across the room. Ivory stood near the back wall and watched all of it. She thought about a bench outside a bank in Detroit, 31 years ago. A woman with a notebook who sat down beside a stranger and asked if she was all right. She thought about what it meant that the best thing Celestine Beaumont had ever done was not the loan, or the 30 years that followed it, or any of the measurable things. The best thing Celestine had ever done was raise this woman. And she had done it so well that when the right moment came, all Ivory had to do was open a door. Every time Wren read that last notebook entry, she thought about the funeral she had missed. The goodbye she had not gotten to say. The twice her mother had asked for her, and the waiting room she had been sitting in instead. And every time, she arrived at the same place. Her mother had said it anyway. Quietly. Without performance. Through a woman on a bench, and a 30-year friendship, and a door opened at exactly the right moment. She had said, "I see you. I have always seen you. I believed in what you were before you were ready to believe in it yourself." Patient women, it turned out, were rewarded. Just not always in the direction they had been facing while they waited. And if you are sitting with this right now, carrying something heavy, waiting for a signal that it is safe to finally choose yourself, I want you to consider that the signal may have already come. That the right moment may be this one. That the door does not always look like a door. Sometimes it looks like an envelope on a front desk in a quiet town that a coworker tells you not to open. Open it. If this story reached something in you, leave a comment below. Tell us where you are watching from. Tell us what it touched. Like the video, share it with someone who needs it today, and subscribe so you are here when we bring you the next one. We will be back. And there will be another story waiting.